Indiana is now 0 for 2 on the names they wanted to be their next head coach. So now they look to these names.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Well, happy Monday. Hope you're doing well. If you're an Indiana fan, you should be doing well with a huge win over Purdue yesterday. Had a reaction episode for you on the channel yesterday. If you missed that, go check it out once you're done here. We'll talk more about how big that win over Purdue was and what that means for the rest of this week and the rest of this season for Indiana basketball. But we're now looking back at the coaching search right now that we have a couple of days to talk and think about it between games. It's back to who's going to be the next head coach of Indiana basketball. And we had already kind of been punched in the stomach once with Brad Stevens. More on that in a moment. But we seem to have been punched in the stomach again with Dusty May from Michigan. If you remember on Brad Stevens, right? You remember with Brad Stevens, and we're going to talk about some more names today about where Indiana should go from here. But you remember the Brad Stevens thing when the news about Mike Woodson came out that he was going to retire, he was going to step down. It was sort of this mutual thing, right? He was no longer going to be the coach at IU. It was, well, who's going to be? Where do we go? And most people, like we did the last time, said Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens, Brad Stevens, Brad Stevens. Makes sense, right? It makes sense. The guy who has been connected with Indiana, the state of Indiana basketball, who has coached in the state of Indiana. It just makes sense to bring him back to the college game and give him the biggest job of coaching in his lifetime in the college level. Obviously, he was the coach of the Celtics, but give him his biggest coaching job ever at the college level. And Indiana went after him, and he shut it down pretty quickly with the reports from Jeff Goodman. He said, I'm not interested. And you know what? It's really hard to blame him, given the fact that he is now with such a high role in the Boston Celtics where he doesn't have to coach, something he has not done in college in over a decade now. He doesn't want to coach anymore, I don't think. He doesn't want to be a part of it, especially now in the college game where you have to deal with NIL and transfer portal. Somebody like him who comes from the older school era probably doesn't want to deal with that anymore. And Brad Stevens said, nah, I'm good for the second time. So that kind of hurt, right? That wasn't fun to have to hear that and not even hear it from directly from him. We had to go through Jeff Goodman to get the information. So not great, but it is what it is. So Brad Stevens says no. So then the other name that was the top of the board, somebody we had talked a ton about here on the program, was Dusty May, the head coach in Michigan. This one made total sense. A guy who loves Indiana, the state, loves IU, was a manager here, was a part of the Indiana program, right? He literally has ties to IU, to the university, to the Hoosiers, to the brand, to the name, to the colors, to the logo. He has ties here. And so this one made a lot of sense. And there's a ton of you Indiana fans who said that we never should have let him walk the first time. They say we never should have let him go from Florida Atlantic up to Michigan. We should have just gotten rid of Woodson and gone after Dusty May. That would have been tough to do, I think, because Woodson had not been here very long. And Michigan made a fantastic hire. Such a fantastic hire. And they know how good it was that they gave him a contract extension. And we have not had a chance to talk about that yet, so we will right now. Dusty May picks up a contract extension from Michigan. He is going to be getting a 1-year extension on the current deal that he has. They signed a 5-year deal. This will add on to that, so this will get him now through the 2030 season there in Ann Arbor. He's getting an increase of $1 million a year onto his salary. The entire coaching staff is going to get a pay raise, a He's supposed to get more NIL money out of this contract extension. We'll see where that comes. And his buyout will now raise to $7.5 million, which isn't crazy in terms of other big buyouts, right? Somebody like Mick Cronin, his is going to drop to, I think, 10 million coming up in a few months. So 7.5 is not this crazy number, but a coach doesn't sign an extension and a university doesn't sign an extension if both sides aren't in agreement. Hey, you're not going anywhere. And that's pretty much what this was. And that's exactly what Dusty May said. He says, quote, "I think it makes it obvious I'm staying at Michigan." He goes on to say, "I really wasn't interested in leveraging and negotiating with Michigan as the team works towards the NCAA tournament." So we're 0 for 2. Indiana is 0 for 2. Brad Stevens was at the top and Dusty May was number 2. And that one really hurts because I had a feeling Brad Stevens was going to say no again, just again, given his situation. But man, Dusty May just made sense. A guy that's winning, obviously. Look at what he's doing at Michigan, man. They're playing really, really good basketball. A program that is going to be in the NCAA tournament, a program that has a chance to win the Big Ten Conference in his first year in Ann Arbor. His first year. Think about what he could have done here in Bloomington, man. He could have turned us around instantly. He did it with transfers. Now he's winning on the floor, and he's going to win in recruiting. Dusty May's a really, really good coach. But he's not going to be a good coach at Indiana because he's staying in Ann Arbor. And so the question becomes, where does Indiana go from here? Where does Indiana move? Down the list you go. And this is always a funny conversation because so many coaches get hired somewhere knowing they were not the first option, knowing they may not even be the second option. And that's what any coach that steps in now, you're not the first, second, maybe even the third option. But remember, we had this little conversation late last week about where does Indiana go if the fifth, sixth, seventh person says no? Then there's some names on there I think you could discuss. One of those was Ben McCollum. The current Drake head coach, who I think is really good and is looking for that jump, right? Looking for that next big job. Seems to be a lot of ties with him to Iowa. And that seems the Iowa job is apparent that it's going to be opening up at the end of this season. And there's a lot of ties for the Drake head coach, Ben McCollum, to be going there. So if that happens, obviously don't think he's going to be coming to Indiana. But I don't think Ben McCollum was at the top of the list either. There are, however, 2 big names, 3 really, that I think Indiana's going to next. And we'll have those for you in our next segment right here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Prize Picks. March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. Building lineups like this week, Jason Tatum, that's my guy. He's going for 29 points. May as well just say he's going for more and that he's going to get 30 plus. Plus, it's quick and easy. I like how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And when I win, my money hits my account in less than 15 minutes. So there's no waiting around for your payment. You get it in under 15 minutes. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. If you are listening on the audio side of things on any of those platforms, whether you're driving or cooking or doing whatever you're doing, we appreciate you listening to us each and every day. Our audio numbers are growing, so we appreciate all of you guys doing that. Be sure that you have those notifications turned on because I don't want you to miss bonus episodes like we had yesterday, a reaction to Indiana beating Purdue inside of Assembly Hall. We'll talk more about that in this final segment, but have a whole episode for you yesterday in case you missed that. So I have those notifications turned on. Leave us those 5-star reviews. That all helps us out. a ton on the audio side of things. And if you're watching on YouTube, where the numbers are doing really, really well, is also really appreciate you being here. Appreciate you making this your go-to spot for everything Indiana. Like this video if you don't mind. Hit that thumbs up with your thumb. Takes one tap. It's super easy. Helps other people out in the world find it, thanks to the YouTube algorithm, however that thing works. Leave your comments down below. Are you upset that Indiana's 0 for 2 in the coaching search? Are you upset that Brad Stevens has said no and Dusty May basically said no by taking a contract extension at Michigan? Doesn't mean he's completely out, but that's a pretty good sign, especially when he says, I'm not going anywhere. So how do you feel about that? Let me know down in the YouTube comments below. And then if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're making a push to 5,000 subscribers, ladies and gentlemen. We're over 4,700. So 48's the next rung, 49, and then 5K. So thank you so much for doing all of that. Really appreciate you helping the show grow. Well, you're 0 for 2 now, if you're Indiana, in the coaching search. And now the question is, all right, well, where do we go from here? And it seems to have a couple of obvious answers and then one not so obvious that's starting to pick up a little bit of steam on the back end. The list seemed to be this. It seemed to be Brad Stevens, Dusty May from Michigan, Scott Drew from Baylor, and Mick Cronin from UCLA. That was the list that I think Indiana wanted to call and had a legitimate shot at landing. Well, again, Brad Stevens says no, and Dusty May says no. So, ultimately, you go down the list. And I think Scott Drew is a very good third option and can now become your top option if you want him to. Scott Drew has won forever. He's been at Baylor forever. And it just makes sense to move in his direction. A guy that has been coaching for 23 years. Remember, he started way back when at Valpo, and now he's been at Baylor. He's got a 65% winning percentage. This guy's a Final Four. He's a national championship coach. I mean, this guy's got it all. And he has made it known on the back end in his circle he would be interested in this job. Question is, do you want somebody who has been coaching for 23 years? He's 54 years old, which is not old by any means in the coaching circles. Do you want somebody who has kind of seen his tenure at Baylor sort of decline over the past couple of years? Not that he's a bad coach or Baylor's a bad program. They're just not where they used to be. So maybe he's looking for something new. Maybe he wants a refresh. Maybe he wants a new challenge. And I think this would be a great place for him. I think it's somewhere that he would really, really thrive here and would bring energy back and just bring legitimate head coach. Talk about a guy with all these names, just X's and O's, just get down dirty and playing basketball. This guy's one of the best on the list. Is he going to be just the most over the top, energized, just go crazy on the sidelines like a Buzz Williams or a Bruce Pearl? No, he's not. But he's a really good coach, and he gets the most out of his guys, and he's a great recruiter too. And he's done that at Baylor, who has money, don't get me wrong, but he could come to IU with some of the best NIL money in the country. He could get the best in the country. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Scott Drew being at the top of the list, and I would be excited about it. I do, however, wonder what the excitement level would be around the Indiana fan base if it is Scott Drew. Does Scott Drew get people excited? Does he bring the passion and the energy that others could bring to get IU fans excited? I don't know. You have to tell me. Tell me down in the YouTube comments or on Twitter or X right at Locked On Hoosiers. Let me know, because I'm genuinely curious. We haven't seen a whole lot of reaction about Scott Drew. We haven't seen a whole lot of traction on him yet because he wasn't at the top of the list. I like him. I think he'd be a good coach. He wouldn't be just the massive splash home run, oh my God type of hire, but I think he should get more coverage than he probably would because of how good of a coach he is. So Scott Drew is in there, and I think he's next on that list. The next guy on that list is Mick Cronin at UCLA, which, from what I'm hearing, is starting to pick up a lot more steam. That he is very interested in the IU job. And I think his camp wants him to get this job. And it's up to Indiana whether they make the call. You're talking about a guy right now, and Mick Cronin at UCLA that has coached for a long, long time. He's got almost a nearly 70% winning percentage in his time at Murray State, Cincinnati, and UCLA. He's been to the Final Four. He knows what he's doing. And you talk about somebody that's going to bring the passion and the energy to the floor, that's going to be Mick Cronin. My only drawback here is people that have worked with him in the past have talked about the type of guy he is. They've talked about how he can be a jerk at times. I don't know that. I've never spoken to the guy in my life. I'm just relaying what I've been told and what I've heard over the years about working with him. He's very passionate and he's very serious about what he does, but he has certain ways of getting it out of people, right? I think he would bring the excitement. I think at 53 years old, he would bring a ton of energy to the sidelines and to Indiana. But would he be the right fit? I think that's the question. He's different than what we've had in the past couple of years. Yes, you've had guys like him, though, right? Hotheads on the sidelines and guys who go crazy, but also celebrate and sweat through their suits and things like that. I mean, we've had guys like that here, and some have worked and some have not. Mick Cronin, however, I think is a what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm on the fence about it. I am. Does he win? Absolutely. Can he coach X's and O's? You bet. Can he recruit? Yep. He can do all of that. And I think he would win here. I do. I think he would win. But I also think he may rub some fans the wrong way. And guess what? If he wins, it doesn't matter because winning cures all. But the problems would come with if he didn't win for whatever reason, especially early on. Early on, if it's not looking good, if you can't win on the floor, if you lose some recruiting battles, plus you act the way that he acts sometimes, then yeah, you may have some issues if you're Mick Cronin, if he is the new head coach for Indiana. But I do think he's still on that list. And I think his phone call is coming if you keep swinging and missing. But the last name I want to talk about is one that I don't think we've mentioned yet. I don't think I've said his name out of my mouth just yet on this podcast here on Locked On Hoosiers. And I'm sorry that I haven't, because I think this one is really, really good. Because if it's not Indiana, it could be somewhere else. I'm talking about Brad Brownell out at Clemson, a guy that has really flown under the radar because he's been at Clemson since 05? Is that right? Has he been there that long? Or 10, sorry. He's been at Clemson since 2010. He was at Wright State from 06 to 2010 and UNC Wilmington from 02 to 2006 when he took the Wright State job. So he's been at Clemson for going on 15 years now. And he's taken them to several NCAA tournaments, 4 on his resume, the 5th one going to be this season. And he took him to the Elite Eight last year. A guy that is really, really good. A guy that is a great head coach and just flies under the radar because he's at Clemson and they're in the ACC, right? They always fly under past Duke, North Carolina, even the NC States of the world. Like, Clemson never really gets the love in basketball. And Brad Brownell is right in that category. And there seems to be a lot of buzz here that this is a name that's flying up the charts, flying up the list for IU if some of these other people say no. Will he be the very next phone call? I doubt it. But I do like this guy. And I think if Indiana had to fall back on someone, Brownell could be your answer. He's got a 62% winning percentage. And his 23 years of coaching. He's 56 years old. He's an Indiana native. Played at DePaul. So you have an opportunity to go get another guy who understands how big the brand of IU is, how big basketball is here at this university and in this state, how important it is to recruit kids right here in the Hoosier state, right? That's what Brownell would bring to you. And sure, he's been on and off the hot seat. He's been in and out of the news and things like that with Clemson, but he's got them playing the best basketball they've ever played during his time there. Why not go get a guy when he's hot? why not go get somebody when he is at the top of his game? And I think Brad Brownell needs to be on that list for IU. The current coach at Clemson, could he be the next coach? I'm not sure. Guess we'll have to see. But I think he is rising up the list and rising up the list fast. All right, coming up in our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, how big was that win yesterday for Indiana over Purdue? We'll tell you next right here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, final segment right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, appreciate you being here. Happy Monday. I appreciate you being with us and getting your week started with Locked On Hoosiers. And you got your week started technically on Sunday with Indiana beating Purdue inside of Assembly Hall, which was just incredible to see, 73-58. Again, if you missed our full reaction episode, that's on the channel. We did that for you yesterday. Go check that out as soon as we're done with today's episode. But how big was this win? How important was it for Indiana to get this win over Purdue at this point in the season? Well, there's a couple of tiers to this, right? One, you get a win over a top 15 team. You needed that. Right? Your win against Michigan State was great. You backed it up with a crappy loss to UCLA, who's a good team, but it just hurt to lose it the way you did. So you were still looking for another big-time win. And you got it. You got it against Purdue, of all teams. That's the other tier here, right? Or another one, I should say, is you evened up your series with Purdue this season. You got to beat them in 2025. And we've had ups and downs in terms of our record against Purdue with Mike Woodson as head coach. It's one of the few things he's actually done kind of good is beat Purdue. And we did it again with a team in Purdue that I think is good, but not great. This is not the Purdues of old that have had Final Four expectations. I think they're a second weekend team. I think they'll make the Sweet 16 and could upset somebody to get to the Elite Eight. But I just don't think that Purdue team is Final Four good, and they're definitely not playing Final Four good right now. And so Indiana took advantage of a Boilermaker team that was on the downslide. And we did, 73-58. You beat them by 15, and you got to do it at home. I can't express how important that was for us to do that inside of Assembly Hall in front of fans that showed up on a Sunday afternoon. Fans that showed up for a team that hasn't showed up for them much this year. And a team that had not won a home game since middle of January. 4 straight losses inside of Assembly Hall before your win yesterday against Purdue. So all of those things are true and all of those things are important, but you also add a resume building win to your belt. You add a win that you desperately needed if you want to try and make the NCAA tournament. And look, I don't think you're still solidly in. I think you may be a last 4 in right now with the win because according to Joe Lunardi, you were next 4 out. So you probably jump one category and move to the last 4 in, which tells us what? Well, it tells us that you can't afford to lose games against bad teams, and you probably still need to win another one to secure a spot in the tournament. And I've seen a lot of people and a lot of fans mention the Big Ten tournament. And, if you get a couple of wins in the Big Ten tournament, we'll be okay. My problem is, folks, the NCAA tournament committee has proven to us that they don't care what happens in conference tournaments. They don't care. Unless you win it, and they have to put you in because of the automatic bid, which I think is stupid, by the way. They don't care what happens in conference tournaments. Wins there just don't matter. And I think that's why eventually conference tournaments are going to disappear. They're going to go away. Same thing with football conference championship games, but not the time for that. So if you're Indiana, or if you're any program, I say this every single year at this time, the last place you want to be, you do not want to be a college basketball team that is fighting to make the NCAA tournament and a team that needs wins in your conference tournament to get there. You do not want to rely on getting wins in the conference tournament to put you into the NCAA tournament for a couple of reasons. One, that's not a given. It's the conference tournament. Anything can happen. All it takes is a team to get hot over 4 days and they can win it all, right? And because the tournament committee, the NCAA tournament committee, has proven that they don't care what happens in these tournaments. They don't. They don't reward wins. They don't hurt for losses. They don't care because their mind's already made up. And so if you're Indiana, we can't put our fate in their hands because we win a game or two in the Big Ten tournament. What we can do is handle our own business and take matters into our own hands down the stretch of our own season. Here's what we have left in the final 4 games of the year. You've got Penn State coming to town on Wednesday night. Have to win that game. They're the second worst team in the Big Ten. You have to win that game. You then go on the road to Washington, who's the worst team in the Big Ten. You have to win that game if you're Indiana. We cannot afford bad losses right now. A bad loss trumps our good wins. Like that, it will be over before you know it. You have to beat Penn State. You have to beat Washington on the road. Then you've got 2 chances. You've got 2 chances against quad 1 teams, at Oregon and home for Ohio State. I think if you win one, you're good. You're in. If you win both, you're definitely in. If you lose both, then we might be in trouble. Then we'll be a bubble team. We will be a legitimate team sitting on our hands on Selection Sunday and hoping and praying that we get in. And at that point, yeah, you may have to get a couple of wins in the Big Ten tournament and hope that they give a crap that you did. I don't want to be there. I don't want to do that. So win the 2 games you're supposed to, which has not been an easy thing for us to do recently. And then at least, at bare minimum, split at Oregon and home for Ohio State. If I had a preference in terms of resume building, go to Oregon, win in Eugene. That would be a massive win for Indiana in terms of your NCAA tournament resume. If you do that, you will be in the NCAA tournament. So how big was the win over Purdue? It gave you life. It saved the season. And people are mad and laughing that I've said that, but it's true. You've given yourself a chance. That's what your wins over Michigan State and Purdue have done. That level of play is in there. You just have to display it time and time again. And over your final 4 games, you have to play that way. And if you do, you're just going to play yourself right into an NCAA tournament bid. All right, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you again so much for being here. If you're listening on audio, follow us there, turn on notifications, leave us a 5-star review, however you can help us out. We really, really do appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, like the video, hit the thumbs up button. It helps us tremendously. Leave your thoughts down below. Can Indiana make the NCAA tournament? Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We're back tomorrow, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.